The Blue Jays have had their share of walk-off wins, but not a lot of them on a walk-off home run. They got one last year by Edwin Encarnacion against the Brewers, and they get their first one of 2015 courtesy of Josh Donaldson.
It is Sportsfeld Storytime. We are looking back to one of our favorites. I don't know. I was going to say our exact favorites, but is this our exact favorite? Who knows? One of our favorites, one of the teams that we talk about more than any other is the 2015 Blue Jays. We are finally talking about the game, the bat flip. Jose Bautista and the Toronto Blue Jays, Game 5 of the ALDS against the Texas Rangers, one of the iconic moments in baseball history, one of the great moments in the last 20 years of the Blue Jays franchise, one of the most important moments I can remember as an adult, and something that, of course, will outlive us all when it comes to replayability. It's something that in the time since it happened, I have maybe seen quite literally 400 times, I would guess. If you had to guess, Jake, how many times have you seen the bat flip in the last 5 years?
I don't know. A lot. It's such an easy, go-to thing to YouTube every now and then.
Mm-hmm. And it comes up every playoffs. It comes up every time the Jays are talked about, every time the Jays make any sort of noise. It's on the list of things that come up an awful lot.
Yeah. There's so many ways to re-experience it. I find you can watch the whole game is on YouTube. The entire seventh inning is on YouTube. Crowd angles of it are on YouTube. Just there's just a lot of, it's become one of those iconic moments where in the age of, I actually want to talk about this last week, but we didn't get to it. So I'm going to talk about it now, where obviously Joe Carter's home run in 1993 is more important as it literally won the World Series, but it happened before the age of cell phones. So it's kind of like, if you want to re-experience Joe Carter, it's kind of like, okay, you watch the highlight we've seen 100,000 times in our life.
Yeah.
I feel like the bat flip has taken on almost this larger than Joe Carter place in Blue Jays lore, which I don't think it should, again, just because of what it is, but I understand why it did. And that is because there's so much film of it.
Absolutely.
And it is truly the taken as a whole, that inning, it's fucking insane.
Yes, I think that obviously has a big part of it. It has to be taken as a whole. It's sort of, obviously the highlight itself is hype and it's just upon itself, and the building almost comes down with how exciting it is. But the inning that precedes it certainly adds to the lore. Yeah,
and I think obviously a lot of it is youth, and a lot of it is that Carter was almost 30 years ago now. But I find the levels of importance, hype, whatever you want to call it, of the two in Blue Jays fandom very interesting. And it is sadly something I think about a lot, because I do think it's really interesting how it's almost like Joe Carter's World Series winning home run, the most famous Blue Jay play of all time, is underrated now.
Yeah, I agree.
It's weird. It's very weird. And I think it's really interesting.
I agree. And we will get into sort of the lasting effects, and we'll get into that inning a little bit in the future. But right now, I want to talk a little bit about the season that these Jays have. And listen, we did an episode dedicated to David Price. We did an episode dedicated to the Royals series. So this is stuff we sort of have talked about a little bit, but this 2015 team, and we went through all the moves they had made in the offseason previously. All the signs are there throughout the year. They go on an 11-game winning streak in June before the big deals that takes them all the way within one game of the division at 34-30. It takes them from 23-30, where it's like, oh my goodness, the team the year before was actually bad and they overperformed, and maybe that team that we thought was in the cusp of the playoffs, maybe they are frauds, and they should sell Bautista. Maybe they should move on from these guys. Maybe they shouldn't be a huge thing. And they go on an 11-game winning streak in the beginning of June to sort of set themselves up to be ready for the trade deadline at the end of July, because we have talked many, many times, Jake, the Troy Tulowitzki trade happens when they are 51 That early part of that year, before they made the big deals, sort of where were you? And listen, we had the show, so we have some evidence, but where were you sitting in terms of what the season was going to be and what they were going to do with this powerhouse offense they had put together?
There was a lot of conversation in the first half of the 2021 season on Blue Jays Twitter of how frustrated should we be. And a lot of the conversations I saw and a couple I was a part of was kind of like, was it this frustrating for the first half of 2015? The answer is yes.
Absolutely. Especially coming off 2014.
The first half of 2015 was no fucking fun because you knew how good they were. It was evident immediately. My first memory, but I have two real memories to start of this team that was like, okay. The first was I was at Raptors versus Wizards game 1. The Gravis Vasquez shot and they lose in overtime. That same day, as we were walking from the ACC to the bar after the game in despondent sadness because the Raptors were choking in the playoffs again, Josh Donaldson walked off the Braves to like 12,000 people in May. And I remember like, okay. The next memory I have is I think 2 or 3 days later, I believe 2 days later, the Raptors getting smoked by the Wizards once again. On the other TV in the bar that I was at, which I believe no longer exists. The bar, not the TV.
Yeah, well, probably both.
Our attention shifted because the Raptors were getting killed. I think it was game 2 against the Wizards. And on the other TV, we saw Jose Bautista hit a fuck you home run and then injure himself trying to throw Adam Jones out at first base out of spite for the Orioles because that's what he did.
This parade.
Bautista looks out at the pitcher. That ball went behind him.
And Bautista just looks at the pitcher and says, what's going on? And now the plate umpire, Mark Carlson, issues warnings to both dugouts. Here comes John Gibbons out.
And that look tells you all you need to know about what Bautista thinks about that. 3-1, nobody out. Donaldson at third. He moved up on the wild pitch. Bautista drives it deep to left. He's amazing. And he enjoys it. Garcia threw one behind his back. It rattled his cage, and he goes deep.
You know, in all my years watching baseball, I don't know if I've ever seen a guy rise to the occasion when he feels like they're trying to throw at him.
And it's funny how at the time it was kind of like, Jose, you got to be careful. But now it's like that was this team. And to have this fun fuck you team led by Jose Bautista and sort of still getting over the irritation and sadness of the Marcus Stroman injury and to see how good they were. Because we all knew they were good. I don't want to keep quoting the run differential because we've been talking about that for like 10 months now, and I'm tired of it. But like, they were so good, and they were 500 the whole time. Mm-hmm. And it was so fucking frustrating, especially as you say, coming off 2014, which was a frustrating year in a totally different way. But like, you look at the way the record was, it wasn't even like they went on a run in the first half. Either way, they're 11-12 at the end of April. They're 23-29 at the end of May. They're 41-38 at the end of June. Like, it was just, they're 53-51 at the end of July. The first 4 months of the year was just like they go on one run to go from 23-29 to 34-30 at the beginning of June. And other than that, the longest streak is a 5-loss streak and a 3-win streak. And it was just that. And it's unbelievable and very frustrating in light of the season we just watched that this whole time they're like 5 games back in the division.
Yeah, isn't that unbelievable? that is sort of crazy is even when they're like a 500 team, 51-51, they're like 6 games back. It's like, it's such a, boy, oh boy. Within 3 weeks, they're up a game, right? But by August 23rd, they're in the lead in the division, and they are absolutely chewing teams up and spitting them out, all culminating in the famous hangover game in New York in September, the 81-60.
It is kind of funny based on like the how are you feeling discussion, how the first half of that season of time was so frustrating. And then looking at it now after this year and looking at the standings, like, boy, we didn't know how good we had it the first half of 2015.
It's hard. They won 93 games and won the division by 6, Jake. Won the division by 6 with 93 wins. They'd have been 7 games back at the 2021 Rays.
Like, look, they were 8 out on July 28th, and that alone to come back and win by 6 is impressive.
As you said, it gets them a playoff spot. They get the division. They win the division handily with 93 wins, which, saying it now, sounds absurd. Getting you into a playoff series with the Texas Rangers, who at the time they were not rivals with. They could not care less about the Texas Rangers, the 88-74 Texas Rangers. And I'll tell you, 2 games into this series, it was here we go again. This is classic Toronto sports. David Price gives up 5 earned runs in the first game. It does not start out well for the Blue Jays. They give up 2 runs in the 3rd, 2 runs in the 5th, and another one in the 7th. And the offense, it's a Jose Bautista home run. You know, the vaunted offense held to just 3 runs. It was not the start that you would look for most of the time if you're a Blue Jays fan.
My lasting memory of game 1 of this series, and it's not a memory you should have of a playoff series, but my lasting memory is sitting in the bar I was at, watching the game, staring daggers at the score overlay, and just being like, boy, I miss when it was 0-0. Because it was hard to be as excited for a game as you were as a Jays fan for game 1 of this series. Finally, we watched, there was playoff baseball for the Blue Jays. And then it just was like a wet fart. And it was so disheartening.
I was there with my wife, sitting in the very back row in the 500s. Not much better in game 2 with Stroman on the hill. He gives up 3 straight hits to open the game, a double, a single, another single, and then a fielder's choice. And it's 2-0 before the Jays even come up. Donaldson homers, Hanser Alberto cashes in a walk. So it's 3-1, and then Martin singles and Pilar scores 1. So it's 3-3 through 2. This one goes all the way, Jake, to extra innings, tied at 4 as the Rangers tack one on in the 8th to tie it at 4. It goes all the way to the 14th inning. God damn it, Jake.
I hate this.
LaTroy Hawkins gives up 2 runs in the 14th.
This is one of my least favorite Blue Jay games of all time.
Oh,
I don't know. It's because we were there, which was like, It was not a fun experience. Like it was
not. No.
Living and dying with every pitch, but not in a fun way. I think if they were up 1-0 in the series and this game happened, I think it would have been a lot different. But we were just watching it sort of slip away, and it was so tense in that building. I don't know if you remember, but after, like,
oh yes,
when did the game get tied?
Game gets tied in the 8th. A run off of Brett Cecil, unearned run.
And then I believe
Brett Cecil.
In that inning is also when Brett Cecil hurt himself and was out for the rest of the playoffs.
Error on Russell Martin, of all people.
From the moment Texas tied that game, which you say, oh, it's the 8th. There wasn't much game left. Well, it went to the 14th. The moment, actually not even. The beginning of the game, Texas scores 2 in the first inning, in the top of the first. From that moment, Delino DeShields doubles to lead off the game. From that double, it was like you could feel the air being just like everyone was just holding breath the whole game. It was no fun. And even when the Jays took the lead in the 5th, it was kind of like it's only 3-2. They're not like doing the things we've seen. Like they're not scoring 14 runs like we're used to. And it really did feel like waiting for Texas to tie it. And then they did. And then Cecil gets hurt and they keep using pitchers. It was just like, and I remember saying to you when Hawkins came out, oh boy. And Texas scored almost immediately on LaTroy Hawkins. And to make it even worse, in the bottom of the 13th, Edwin hits one to the track which I will never forget that
Ugh.
hit in my life. Just like, Skydome has a rap for the crowd declaring a home run before it leaves the yard, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
The sound in the building, you can kind of hear it on the game highlights, but the sound in the building of the ball leaving the bat to realizing it wasn't getting out was awful.
There's a drive to deep center field. Backing up is DeShields, and he has just enough room in front of the fence. Wow.
Truly, no argument here. A truly brutal. I can't believe that didn't go out. It reminds me now of the last game we went to on Wednesday.
Absolutely.
Vlad hit the ball at the top of the wall. Things would turn around. It's Marco Estrada. Marco Estrada in game 3. Incredible. 6 1/3, 5 hits, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts. It's funny, just looking back at the game we just talked about, already just 5-6 years later, it's like, man, I can't believe Stroman went into the 8th inning of that game. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? He only gave up 3 runs, but the 8th inning? What is he, Max Scherzer? What the hell's going on? Marco Estrada, 6 innings, 6 1/3, 5 hits, 1 earned, 4 Ks. You get Loop for an out, Lowe for an out, Sanchez and Osuna. I remember being upset that Osuna was used with a 4-run lead, but I believe that's just how it went. I was like, you can't let them see Osuna this many times in one series.
Well, it was also the discussion was also, has he pitching too many innings?
Yes,
if you remember.
Right. I do remember that. The Blue Jays win this one 5-1 though, a little bit more handily. Tulo with a massive home run, the massive Tulo Road home run. I was at my wife's family's house, I believe, in her basement, watching the Tulo home run. Tulo has 4 RBIs in this game. The 6th inning, with the game just 2-0 Blue Jays, Tulo hits the bomb into left field to make it a bigger lead, and the Jays hold on to it. That 5-1 win for the Blue Jays in this one.
I remember watching, it was the next game, game 4. Watching this game, I believe that would have been Canadian Thanksgiving weekend.
Correct. Thanksgiving Monday. The 4th game of this series is Thanksgiving Monday.
We attended game 2. I watched game 1 in a bar with lots of people. I watched game 3 in a bar with lots of people. Game 4, everyone's out of town because it's Thanksgiving Monday, as you said. And I remember watching it with just my parents and them being really excited that the Jays jumped out to this 3-0 lead. And I refused to get excited until it was 6-1 for the Blue Jays after 3 innings. I was like, there's no way where it's going to be this easy to come back.
Yes. Robert Allen Dickey against the team that drafted him, the Texas Rangers. 7-0 Blue Jays after the top of the 3rd. They get all over it. They absolutely jump on Derek Holland to the tune of 6 runs. They get on Colby Lewis as well, but it's a Donaldson home run, a Colabello home run, a Pilar home run, and then Encarnacion with a ground out that scores a run, Colabello with a double that scores Encarnacion, and Pilar with a single that scores Colabello, make it 7-0 Blue Jays. A wild pitch would score a runner in the 3rd, but that is about it until David Price, Jake, comes on in relief.
The big debate. In
the 5th inning of this game, I remember quite well David Price coming on in relief and being in my sister's house on Thanksgiving. David Price with 2 out in the 5th comes in. He gives you the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. Gives up 2 runs in the 8th. Sign of things to come. But he takes you from the 5th to the 8th, getting you to Osuna, who once again, I am like, I can't believe they have to use Osuna in this game where they're up 4, but you take the wins when you can get them. And that, my friend, sets the stage for game 5. How did you remember feeling about, oh my God, David Price is coming on in relief?
I remember just mostly being annoyed at the narrative about it. It's one of the most exhausting, irritating Blue Jays fans narrative. The should he come on in relief discussion. It always seemed, who cares to me? Like, I don't think they necessarily needed to bring him in game 4 when they were up 7-1, but I kind of understand it as like a statement of, we're up. We better make sure that everything's fine, especially with Cecil on the mend. But the whole conversation around David Price not being good in the playoffs, I thought was kind of annoying and stupid. But
sure,
I just remember not really caring. I remember like we have a good pitcher pitching. That's great. He wasn't starting game 5 anyway. So,
no, he was not.
So, who cares? I always found that whole narrative silly.
It's wild. It is sort of wild to think about in hindsight, but it worked. As Drew Fairservice would say, they rode him hard and put him away wet. David Price. And that would set the stage for Marcus Stroman against Cole Hamels. Game 5 of the ALDS, Wednesday, October 14th, 4:07 local time. 50,000 people in the Rogers Center to witness one of the greatest single innings in baseball history. We'll talk about that next time on Sportsfeld Storytime.